The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window as I carefully wrote in both anniversary cards. My handwriting was deliberately different in each. One elegant and flowing, signed "All my love, Catherine." The other more casual with "Love you always, Kate." Same person, different personas. Just like my husband's double life. My name is Katherine Chen, and for the past 3 years, I've been sharing my husband of 15 years with another woman, though neither he nor she knows that I know. Michael thinks he's been clever, compartmentalizing his 2 lives with military precision. Catherine, the successful corporate wife in the city. Kate, the relaxed beach housewife who thinks he's a traveling consultant. I uncapped a second pen, adding final touches to both cards. The irony of buying anniversary cards from the same store wasn't lost on me. But then Michael had always been prone to patterns, even in his deceptions. "Everything's confirmed for tonight." My phone buzzed with a text from Claire, my closest friend and the only person who knew what I had planned. "Yes," I typed back. "Dinner reservation for 7 p.m. Michael thinks it's just a small gathering of close friends. What my husband didn't know was that tonight's anniversary celebration would have some unexpected guests. After 3 years of quiet observation, of methodically gathering evidence and tracking his elaborate deceptions, it was finally time for the truth to surface. I thought back to the day I first discovered his secret family. It hadn't been through any dramatic revelation or private investigator's report. Instead, it was a simple banking error, a misdirected statement showing mortgage payments on our beach house, a property that was supposed to be a vacation rental generating income. Curious, I'd driven down to check on the property only to find a home that was clearly lived in. Family photos on the walls, children's toys in the yard, and there, prominently displayed on the mantel, a wedding photo of my husband with another woman. Most wives would have confronted their husbands immediately. Some would have called lawyers or created scenes. But I'm not most wives. My years as a corporate strategist had taught me the value of patience, of gathering complete information before making any moves. So I watched. I learned. I documented. Michael's pattern was clockwork precise. 3 weeks in the city with me, his business trips perfectly timed to correspond with his 3 weeks at the beach house with them. He maintained separate phones, separate bank accounts, even separate personalities. Michael Chen, the polished executive with me. Mike Chen, the laid-back consultant with them. The other woman, Sandra, seemed nice enough from my discreet observations. Early 30s, former yoga instructor, now a stay-at-home mom to their twin 4-year-old boys. She genuinely believed she was married to a traveling consultant who worked hard to give them a beautiful life by the beach. The flowers just arrived. Claire's next text broke through my thoughts. White lilies for the city wife, pink roses for the beach wife. His exact orders. I smiled grimly. Even in this, Michael maintained his categorizations. Catherine got sophisticated lilies. Kate got romantic roses. His dual anniversaries were just 3 days apart. Another detail that spoke to his hubris. He really thought he could keep this going indefinitely. Standing up from the kitchen table, I walked to my home office, a space Michael never entered, respecting my work privacy, as he called it. The irony was rich. Opening a hidden panel in my desk, I pulled out 3 years' worth of evidence, bank statements, property records, surveillance photos, GPS tracking data. Everything documenting how my husband had built and maintained his double life. But the most damning evidence had arrived just last week. Proof that Michael had been systematically embezzling from his company to maintain his 2 households. He'd hidden it well, but my corporate background had helped me follow the money trail. His carefully constructed world wasn't just a moral fraud, it was a criminal one. My phone buzzed again. A text from Michael this time. "Can't wait for tonight, darling. Small celebration with friends is perfect." Then this weekend, that business trip to Chicago. Chicago. Right, that's what he told me. Just like he told Sandra he had a consulting job in Seattle. In reality, he'd booked a romantic getaway with his girlfriend. Yes, there was a third woman, though she at least knew he was married. To Sandra, not to me. The complexity of his deceptions would have been almost impressive if it weren't so destructive. 3 years of watching him juggle lives, of seeing him twist himself into different versions for different women. All while I quietly gathered evidence, built my case, and planned for this moment. The doorbell rang. Claire, arriving early to help with preparations. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a tight hug. You don't have to go through with this, she said softly. We could just send the evidence to his company's board. Let the legal system handle it. I shook my head, pulling back. No, he needs to face what he's done. All of it. Everyone needs to see the truth at once. And Sandra? Are you sure about including her? She deserves to know. Her boys deserve to know. This isn't just about exposing Michael. It's about ending the lies for everyone involved. Claire nodded, understanding. She'd been there through everything. The discovery, the shock, the careful planning. She knew why it had to be this way. We spent the next few hours preparing. The private dining room at Les Cirque had been booked for months. The guest list carefully curated. Close friends, yes, but also key members of Michael's company's board. People who needed to witness what was about to unfold. Sandra confirmed she's coming, Claire reported, checking her phone. She thinks she won a random dinner for two at Les Cirque. Her sister's watching the boys. I nodded, checking my reflection in the mirror. The black cocktail dress was elegant but understated. Katherine's style, not Kate's. Tonight, there would be no more dual personas. The evidence was already in place at the restaurant, copies of documents discreetly positioned at each place setting, ready to be revealed at the right moment. The private investigator's final report confirming the full scope of Michael's financial fraud. Even the girlfriend's sworn statement turned over in exchange for immunity from any legal complications. Your car's here, Claire called from the window. Are you ready? I picked up both anniversary cards, tucking them into my clutch. I've been ready for 3 years. The ride to the restaurant was quiet, my mind racing through every detail one final time. The timing had to be perfect. Sandra would arrive first, seated in the private room's alcove, visible to the main table but separate enough that Michael wouldn't see her immediately. Then the other guests, the board members, our friends. Michael would arrive last, expecting an intimate anniversary dinner. Instead, he would walk into the complete unraveling of his carefully constructed fraud. As we pulled up to Les Cirque, I thought about the moment 3 years ago when I first seen that wedding photo on the beach house mantel. The shock, the pain, the disbelief. But mostly, I remembered the cold clarity that had settled over me, the certainty that this would end on my terms, not his. Claire squeezed my hand as we stepped out of the car. No matter what happens in there, she said quietly, you're the strongest person I know. I smiled, feeling strangely calm. It's time everyone else knew the truth too. The maitre d' led us to the private dining room, where everything was arranged exactly as planned. In less than an hour, Michael's perfect deception would shatter. But first, I had an anniversary card to place at his seat. The one signed Katherine, of course. The other card, signed Kate, would be waiting with Sandra in the alcove. Let him try to explain that to the room full of witnesses. I checked my watch. 30 minutes until it all began. The private dining room at Les Cirque filled slowly, each arrival carefully orchestrated. Sandra was already tucked away in the alcove, happily sipping champagne, believing she'd won a luxury dinner experience. She looked beautiful in a blue cocktail dress that Michael had bought her, with company money, of course. Board members arrived in small groups, greeting me warmly. Michael had always bragged about how his wife charmed his colleagues. Tonight, that report would serve a different purpose. Katherine, darling. Michael's voice boomed from the doorway exactly on schedule. This is perfect. Intimate, elegant, just like you. He crossed the room to kiss my cheek, and I caught the faintest whiff of unfamiliar perfume. Not Sandra's. The girlfriend's. Even tonight, he couldn't help himself. Happy anniversary, I said, touching the card at his place setting. 15 years. Best years of my life, he replied smoothly, ever the perfect husband. His eyes swept the room, cataloging guests, probably calculating if he could slip away early for a call to Sandra or his girlfriend. I checked my watch. Time. Before we begin, I stood raising my glass. I'd like to propose a toast to anniversaries. Michael beamed, clearly pleased with what he assumed was a traditional celebration. But not just to our anniversary, I continued. You see, this week marks another special occasion. Would you like to tell everyone about it, Michael? Or should I ask Sandra? The color drained from his face as Sandra stepped out of the alcove, confusion written across her features. Mike, she said, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Seattle. The room went deadly quiet. Michael's head swiveled between us. his practiced charm evaporating as he realized what was happening. Who? Sandra looked at me. Who are you? I'm Katherine Chen, I said calmly. Michael's wife. His first wife. Though he never bothered to divorce me before marrying you. The gasps around the table were audible. Board members leaned forward, witnesses to the unfolding drama. That's impossible, Sandra stammered. Mike's a consultant. We live at the beach. In a house owned by us, I supplied. Paid for with money he embezzled from his company to maintain both households. Would you like to see the proof? I nodded to Claire, who began distributing folders to each guest. Bank statements, property records, surveillance photos. 3 years of methodically gathered evidence. Kat, Michael found his voice, switching to damage control. We can talk about this privately. Like you talked privately with Jessica last night, I asked sweetly. Your girlfriend sends her regards, by the way. She was quite helpful once I showed her proof of both marriages. His face contorted as the full impact hit him. Not just the exposure of his dual marriages, but the comprehensive destruction of his carefully crafted deceptions. Did you really think you could keep this going forever? I asked, genuinely curious. The separate phones, the careful scheduling, the compartmentalized lives. Sandra had sunk into a chair, tears streaming down her face as she read through the evidence. The boys, she whispered. What am I going to tell our boys? Tell them their father is a fraud. One of the board members spoke up, his voice hard. These financial records. Michael, do you have any idea how serious this is? Michael's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes, allies, anything. Finding none. Why? Sandra looked at him, her voice breaking. Why would you do this to us? He opened his mouth, closed it. For once the man with a story for everything had nothing to say. I'll tell you why, I said, my calm finally cracking. Because he could. Because he thought he was clever enough to get away with it. Because men like Michael view lives the way they view offshore accounts, something to be managed and manipulated for their own benefit. I turned to the board members. You'll find complete documentation of his embezzlement in Section 3. My lawyers have copies of everything. Katherine, Michael tried one last time. Think about what you're doing. 15 years of marriage, and 3 years of watching you live a lie. I finished. Did you ever love either of us? Or were we just roles you played, parts in your elaborate performance? The silence that followed was answer enough. Sandra stood suddenly, dignity replacing her shock. The boys have swimming lessons tomorrow, she said quietly. I always wondered why you never attended. I guess now I know. You were probably here playing husband to her. She walked to me, hand extended. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I took her hand, squeezing gently. Neither of us did. But we know now. The next hour was a blur of activity. Board members made calls to lawyers and compliance officers. Sandra left to be with her boys, clutching copies of everything she'd need for her own legal proceedings. Police were notified about the financial fraud. Through it all, Michael sat silently, watching his carefully constructed world crumble. You could have confronted me 3 years ago, he said finally as the room emptied. Why wait? Why go through all this? I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. This stranger who'd lived so many lies. Because you needed to face everyone whose lives you destroyed, I replied. Because the truth isn't just about facts and evidence. It's about consequences. What happens now? Now, I gathered my things, including both anniversary cards. Now you face those consequences. The board will press charges for embezzlement. Sandra will file for divorce. The legal one, since her marriage was never valid. And me? I smiled. I'll be taking a long vacation. In the beach house. As I walked out of Le Cirque that night, Claire beside me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Was it worth it? She asked softly. The waiting, the watching, all of it. I thought about the moment I first discovered his betrayal. The choice I'd made to be patient, to gather evidence, to plan this precise unraveling of his deceptions. Yes, I said finally. Because this wasn't just about exposing Michael. It was about giving everyone involved their power back, their truth back. In the weeks that followed, Michael's world imploded completely. The company pressed charges. Both marriages ended, mine in divorce, Sandra's in annulment. His girlfriend vanished with a hefty payment from me in exchange for her testimony. I kept the beach house. Sometimes Sandra brings the boys over. they like the beach. And we formed an unlikely friendship built on shared experience and healing. Michael went to prison for the embezzlement. 8 years, no parole. His last message to me was typically self-absorbed. I still don't understand why you had to destroy everything. But that was Michael, always seeing himself as the victim, even after orchestrating such elaborate deceptions. The truth is, I didn't destroy anything. He did that himself, with every lie, every deception, every calculated betrayal. I just made sure everyone saw it at once, in a way he couldn't charm or lie his way out of. 1 year later, I sat on the beach house deck, watching the sunset. Sandra and the boys had been over for dinner. A regular occurrence now. We formed a strange sort of family, bound together by the man who betrayed us both. Do you ever regret it? Sandra had asked earlier, not confronting him immediately. I thought about those 3 years of waiting, watching, preparing. The cold clarity that had driven me to orchestrate such a public revelation. No, I'd replied honestly, because sometimes the biggest impact isn't in the moment of discovery. It's in making sure the truth comes out in a way that no one can deny or escape. As I sipped my wine, watching the waves roll in, I thought about anniversaries. Michael had always loved them. The pageantry, the performance, the perfect husband act. Now he marked different anniversaries, days in prison, counting down his sentence. But I marked new anniversaries too. The day I discovered his betrayal. The day I decided to wait and watch. And most importantly, the day I finally revealed the truth, setting everyone free from his web of lies. Some might say 3 years was too long to wait for justice. But as I sat there, peace finally replacing pain, I knew it had been worth every minute. Because in the end, the truth doesn't just set you free, it shows you exactly who you are when you refuse to let someone else's lies define your life.